Today is Tuesday, October 23rd, 2018. This MMA Junkie Radio's pre-show, the show before the show. I am Goz. That's Dan. That's John.
What up?
Voice you hear in your head, that's Dan Yokers.
That me.
You guys playing the lotto or what?
Man, I mean, I should. I'm not. I just haven't had time because you got to run. It's so ridiculous that in the state of Nevada, where we have literally every other legal vice that you could possibly want, and even those that you know that aren't exactly legal but are still readily available, that we don't have the lottery, that you have to leave the state to get it. Now we live very close to two state lines, but you still got to commit, a little bit of time to go get them.
You can't have everything. For crying out loud.
I know, it's garbage. I want everything. So I'm not playing, which seems kind of silly because, I mean, when you're talking about $1.2 billion, it does seem like 1.6?
It's $1.6 billion.
It does seem like you should get something.
So shouldn't it
so
be
it could
even
go
bigger
up.
By
Well, I think they usually anticipate.
Oh, yeah.
Don't they usually anticipate a little bit?
No, I think it hit over 1.4 before the drawing of like last week.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so I think it's actually at 1.6.
All right, guys,
now.
I gotta go. You guys have a good show. I'm out.
Yeah,
really. does the road show get its own specialized trailer at that point?
Should,
what happens? What happens if you're hypothetical if you win?
Dude, if I had 1.6 billion, yeah, the road show price, it would become the air show because we'd be the private jet, dude. It's G6ing it from show to show.
So I asked the guys
in a
the
minute.
other day, what's the asshole thing you would do? I'll give you my example.
Okay.
You know Baker on the way driving the
Yeah.
They have the world's biggest
You
thermometer.
just tear it down?
No.
Just build one bigger?
In the next city over. Just, just a little bit bigger. What would you do?
I like that.
Oh, that's funny, man. I don't have that evil spirit in me, dog.
No,
I'm
there's
just
gotta
me.
be something.
I'm kumbaya and love and
Proper 13. Just
what's up, man?
like, there's got to be one thing you would do.
Buy MMA fighting and shut it down.
Something, right?
Private 30.
Just that one little evil sinister thing.
Sounds cool. I see. No, I guess John be more of a beer guy. Like I see, you'd be Eli's ale, so you have something to pass down to your son. Be like, the wife gives you a hard time. Like, hey, I'm building an empire for our son right here. All right, one crack at a time.
That'd be amazing.
All right, guys, coming up. Stand by.
We're doing your hypothetical for the lotto.
This is your captain speaking. We are making our descent into Las Vegas McCarran Airport. On behalf of our crew, we'd like to thank you for flying MMAjunkie Airlines. Now please fasten your seatbelts and put your tray tables in your upright position because the descent is going to be a little bit bumpy.
All right, Junkie Nation, it's time to roll, baby, on MMAjunkie Radio with Gorgeous George and Gold. This is what we do and why we do it, baby. All night long, we rollin'! Yeah!
The MMAjunkie Radio revolution is upon us.
Can you dig it?
There's no escape. No escape. Through the vast frontier of cyberspace and through a sea of stars in outer space.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We've solidified our combat communication stranglehold.
We are controlling transmission.
With the use of MMAjunkie Radio and SiriusXM satellite radio technology. MMAjunkie Radio. Commence transmission. Live from MMAjunkie Radio HQ in the fight capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. Here are your hosts, Gorgeous George and Go.
From the fight capital of the world, inside the beautiful Mandalay Bay Race and Sportsbook, you're listening to the MMAjunkie Radio Show, the only show that matters. I'm your host, Gorgeous George. With me, as always, is the devious and dastardly Goz. Our ace co-host to my left, it's the fight analyst, Dan Tom. Producing back east, Danny Otto. And our special co-host for the day, former Journalist of the Year at the World MMA Awards, John Morgan.
What's going on?
What's up?
Happy to be here.
Yeah. You happy about that Cooper trade?
Yeah, I don't.
A solid wide receiver.
It's solid. It's good for the Cowboys, and I guess it's good for our future Raiders. They're obviously just stocking up and don't give a damn about Oakland. You know what I mean?
5 first-round draft picks
so
headed their way in the next couple of years.
I guess we won't get a horrible team when they come here. At least they'll get a team that's got some options to build. So
right. All right, fun show planned for today. We were able to reroute Frank Mir to today's show. Him and along with our other guest, Jon Anik, they'll come by in the second, or, well, phone in the second hour.
No. A little while ago, I just posted he's now rerouted to Thursday.
Cue the face.
Frank Mir.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So Jon Anik's our guest today.
Jon Anik's our guest today.
All right. That's fine. We'll talk. We'll talk to Jon Anik, who just signed a four-year deal with the UFC to stay as their play-by-play commentator, and I think we should be calling him their lead play-by-play commentator. He does all of the big Fox shows, soon to be the ESPN shows. He does the pay-per-views, and he does a lot of pre and post-fight, work for those guys in anticipation of the big fight. So it'll be great to talk to him and just get his thoughts on how that negotiation went. I'm sure he probably earned a good payday, and I'm happy for him.
I hope so.
Mm-hmm. Now, on a sad note, just outside of our sport, I don't know if you guys caught this, but yesterday Roman Reigns from WWE revealed to the world about an 11-year bout that he's had with leukemia. Now, back in 2008, I believe, or I guess if we go back to 2007, there was a diagnosis. In 2008, he actually defeated it, if you will, and it's come back. And so yesterday, in a very emotional speech during Raw, which I did not see, I just happened to be on ESPN and came across this and then came across the video. I clicked it because 99% of me was sure that it was, for real, obviously. But with the WWE, I've seen these guys, put each other in coffins and, come up with all kinds of eccentric matches. And I was like, okay, I got to check this. And it was definitely authentic. He basically left the belt inside of the ring and said, I will be back. I beat it once, and I'll beat it again. But, this is a fight that I'm in, and I asked for, he says, I'll take all of your prayers. I'm not going to lie. You could tell he was nervous, emotional, but strong. Yeah. And, hey, man, salute to you, brother. I really will be praying for you because that's, obviously an illness that has taken many. And you've defeated it once, and he's a big, strong fella, so I imagine he's got just as good of a shot as any. So.
It's funny. I'm not a wrestling guy, and I don't follow very often, but I do listen to Sirius a lot, and so I hear a lot of Busted Open on the network. It is a good show, and so like I like talk radio when I'm in the car to kind of kill time, whatever. So I hear a lot of it. So I don't follow the sport itself or wrestling itself very much, but I do know that Roman Reigns was a guy that apparently fans didn't really understand why he was being pushed or get behind, so to speak. So I do find it kind of interesting. Obviously his health is first and foremost, but you wonder, did his condition and what he was going through play into the WWE's decision to push him or to have him, capitalize on his time in the organization? And do maybe fans feel a little bit bad about, kind of like booing the guy or not standing behind the guy and now finding out what he was dealing with the whole time? So it was something that came to my mind.
He was a heel, right?
No,
I can't even go that far.
He's a baby face, meaning he's supposed to not be a bad guy.
Yeah.
Except he hasn't gotten over with the crowd, which means they haven't accepted him as one of those that they want to embrace as a baby face. So you'll hear him get booed, but he doesn't play the role of a heel. Now, it started to turn recently, and again, I don't really watch it. It's just I listen to Busted Open as well, and occasionally I catch spot videos here and there. So that's why it sounds like I know more than I do. I definitely don't. But he was starting to make some moves. He was gaining a lot of respect, and held the belt a couple times, and it was the current Universal Champ, I guess they call it. So, John, I think to answer your question, I really feel like a fan that booed him because, hey, he's just not my cup of tea. Probably only feels bad because of the news that was revealed last night, not necessarily because of their actions. I think he gets it. I think they all get it. For some it's instant, and others take time, to get over with the fans. So yeah.
Well, I went about 8 or 9 months ago to a Monday Night Raw, and one thing that I do remember was this kid that just wherever he worked, he printed out probably about 2,000 Roman Reigns sucks, just on a regular computer paper, and was passing them out. And I didn't understand because half of the crowd was kind of cheering for him and the other half didn't like him. So I could never tell if he was a heel or if he was a babyface or what his deal was. And then I would see him do these commercials, kind of like what John Cena would do with like little kids and stuff like that. Didn't do the itsy bitsy spider thing, like
the daughter.
So I can't really figure out where he stood with all that, because I was thinking the same thing. Was like, I wonder if people now kind of feel a little bad, or how's that gonna work?
All I know is I've never seen the guy wrestle one match, but it tugged at my heartstrings for sure, and cut through the slight skepticism, because I came from the days where where they were getting crazy, where the Big Show with the guy to play the Giant, his dad's funeral, they're dragging the guy's coffin. I'm like, okay, where's the line here? But no, you could tell this was genuine right off the bat. Really well done. They gave him a great platform, and a great thing to come back to. I mean, imagine what how motivating that's going to be for his fight, knowing that whatever. I'm sure he's secure with his job and fan support that he had, but knowing that he's going to have tenfold that much more fan support, dollars, company backing, all that. When he makes it past his battle. So
yeah, when he comes back, he'll definitely get probably one of the loudest pops ever. In that company's history. So. We definitely wish him well. Again, he's 1-0 against leukemia. Let's see if he can take it to 2-0 and come back. I've never really drawn a line, between pro wrestling and MMA, meaning I'm an MMA guy who doesn't really hate on pro wrestling. I just have been into it and not, and into it and not. Same with boxing and MMA. I've never really felt like, hey, it's you guys versus us. Every once in a while I'll get ticked as I'm listening to talk radio and go, oh, come on, and I feel like I'm defending MMA. But that doesn't stop me from watching that weekend's boxing match.
Against who, though? The Goons, right?
Every once in a while, like another, not necessarily like a Twitter troll fan.
There's Goons up there all the time.
Goons up there, or a talk show radio host, and I always just let them talk and see, hold on a second, is he just being a radio guy and maybe going a little over the top, or is that a genuine feeling? And then you get the idea, and that's that, But I've never really felt that way towards pro wrestling. Anyway,
I'm okay with it, man. As a kid, I liked it. I don't hate on anybody that enjoys it, but I just don't get. I'd rather see a real fight, man. But
do you understand? Do you the whole blurred lines? Do you ever fight that? Because
nope.
I'll be honest. Like, look,
not anymore.
Brock Lesnar. The guy did some shit in MMA, all right? Let's just say Derek Lewis were to knock out Daniel Cormier, which is a possibility, and you matched him up with Brock Lesnar. I'm not so sure you could say Derek Lewis all day. You never know. If he gets taken down,
right?
Brock can sit on top of you
is true.
And beat the crap out of you.
Okay, I wasn't sure where you were headed. It never blurred the lines in terms of when Chael started piping up and Conor came along, that, hey, it's pro wrestling and we don't want me, the casual fan must be pretty stupid if they can't figure out that by the time we start our fight, it's for real.
In the early days of MMA, I think we did fight that. I think people did say, oh, is this fake like pro wrestling? I don't think, at this point, I don't think there's anybody. Now, yes, I heard the couple people that said, hey, was that Habib fight afterwards? Was that staged? Like, that's just stupidity, man. That's not to me like something I even. Yeah, that's not even something I feel I need to address.
And it's like 0.0001% of how.
But I do think in the beginning, like, people didn't understand the difference between mixed martial arts and pro wrestling. I do think that was the thing where they thought, are these fights set up as well? And you're like, no. I mean, that's when they had to go with the tagline. It's as real as it gets. I mean, it's real. I think at this point, 2018, I think everybody gets it. Those are real fights.
That I understand. That's how I got into mixed martial arts, is I saw Pancrase, and I was like, oh, cool, pro wrestling on ESPN. And then all of a sudden, Boss Rudin slaps the shit out of Frank Shamrock. And I'm like, whoa, that's a little strong. And then I figured it out. But so I could see that.
That's
They're
awesome.
in a ring. Okay.
And by the way, John, I saw you tweet the other day a Chipotle. Their hashtag.
Is that not hilarious?
So,
for 25 years.
25 years. So about 2 months ago, I also saw that, and I go, come on. And I was looking around to see, is this in partnership with UFC? They're signing corporate, sponsors everywhere, vodkas and beers. I thought, is this their Mexican food? And I go, wow. And I couldn't even believe Chipotle had been around 25 years, much less that that's what they're using. And so I took a picture of it, and I was going to send it to the staff because, on Slack, we're kind of throwing wild ideas around, and I was going to say, have you noticed on the bag how it's got different years of significance
right.
for? And I was going to say, maybe each person on the staff can just go back to that particular year and just match it up with UFC, because we were coming up on 25 years, and I thought editorial's gonna laugh at my dumb ass. No, I'm just gonna set myself up for Chipotle jokes, and I left it alone. Then I saw you do it, and I go, man, I should have done it.
Yeah, it was funny. No, there's a lot of options that were on the table this year in terms of 25 years. We kind of steered clear of it. Of course, with our staffing changes, that didn't make life any easier. But yeah, man, 25th anniversary coming up. I will say though, along those lines, have you guys been watching the 25 years in short videos?
I also saw you tweet about that.
Love those, man. I think those are coming out great. There's still only about 6 or 7 of them out at this point. So there's still a whole lot to go.
I'm not that far behind.
You're not that far, and the things aren't long. It's not 30 for 30. You know what I mean? These are there are some that are like 20 minutes. Like the Pride one was like 20 minutes. The Pride one I think is probably my favorite so far. And it's not like trying to encapsulate the whole history of Pride. It's really just about, and it's called As a Matter of Pride, or Matter of Pride, but it's really more just about the rivalry between the UFC and Pride. And it was really cool to hear both Dana and Lorenzo Fertitta, because Lorenzo's on there as well, basically admit, and I don't know that I've ever heard him admit quite so candidly that, like, dude, we were small. We were just trying to pretend like we were as big as they were. They were the dominant brand, and we knew we had to go at them just to make it seem like we were as big as they were, when we definitely weren't. So they talked about that, and they've got some great behind the scenes of the whole, Chuck going over and trying to get the fight with Vanderlei. Man, the old school Overeem footage is always shocking to see when he looks like a beanpole, But I mean, some great behind the scenes stuff. Saki Gabara's on there. Probably my favorite one so far. That just came out. There was a great one about when they had to move the fight from New York to Dothan, Alabama in one night, and how it all got done. They actually go and talk to the guy that was the stage manager in Dothan that helped to get this thing done. Like, he gets a call, and he's like, it's the middle of the night, and we need 50 people to get this stage set up, and how they flew it there. And basically, like, the plane was too heavy, so they started dumping people's suitcases, the fighters and stuff, off to get the plane underweight. So they could, I mean, some really cool behind-the-scenes stuff that they've done so far. The Matt Hughes one was super powerful.
That, if I'm not mistaken, is Joe Rogan's first show, Dothan, Alabama.
Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Can't remember that.
I think I've heard him talk about it, and the name stands out.
Makes sense. They, the Matt Hughes one, man. If you haven't seen the Matt Hughes one, dude, I was crying by the end of it, man. It's powerful. So those are good.
Yeah. I plan on checking them out.
Dude. Still gets me every time you hear it.
I heard it brought a tear to Gorgeous George's eye the other night at Quintet.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
I taped it.
I was told.
Did you?
Wow.
My tier or the Quintet?
No, the the Quintet thing.
Oh, man. I heard it, and I go, yes. And I looked over. I was looking for Ant Evans, who happened to be, like, just down my aisle. And I told him, fucking home run.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Now, the lady, Lenny Hart, I think she was just ahead of the guys. Like, they just, I wanted to get out there, like, with a headset and go, come on. Because I wanted to match up the name as the guys were coming up the stairs. But it's their first show in North America. And either way, it was still money. I loved it.
And no shame there. Low-key fact, at least like once through, if I'm doing like a background study on like a top 5 episode or even on breakdown footage, like at least once a week, I feel like there's one thing that'll get me almost like teary-eyed. I'll stay on a fight too long. It'll be a post-fight for a certain memory of a certain guy. And maybe it's just the way I'm wired. I can't help but get so invested, especially if you're just watching fight after fight. You get almost reinvested in the stories you were familiar with, and you catch yourself,
Yeah, man.
So I'm excited to go catch up on those, what John was saying,
man.
not just for the UFC history, but I'm also, a film nerd, and I heard they hired some pretty good directors to do these. So
top-level people, man. These things are really well done. This is not just, UFC internally produced, man. Like you said, they went out and got some top-level directors that have done some, fantastic other stuff. These things are phenomenal, man. They're really cool little tidbits in history.
Are they just dropping them via their email newsletter? Or I don't think
to be honest with you,
I'd like to see more of a public drop.
I'm seeing Twitter, and that's it.
That's the thing is and to be honest with you, like the Twitter I saw for the Pride one was after I'd already watched it. So originally there was like a press release that kind of detailed like here's when the first 8 are coming out, but then they never came out with a press release for the rest. So you're right. I wish they had more of a schedule so you knew. I've just been I'm like you, Dan, Tom. I'm in Fight Pass every day because I'm pulling up footage for one reason or another. I'm looking at different stuff, and I'll just kind of keep an eye on that section. So to me, unfortunately, that's probably one place that they haven't done a great job of is giving you like when to watch, come back, know that it's going to be dropped at this time on this day. But you're not too far behind, man. You could sit down in probably an hour and a half to 2 hours total. You could watch everything they've released so far. I don't even think maybe that long.
Guys like us, I mean, we should be geeking out the way when Ozark drops. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah. When Narcos drops, when that YouTube series of Karate Kid, that one was called
Cobra Kai.
Cobra Kai. That's how we should be reacting and taking to something like that.
I agree.
But I think on their end they need to like publicize it a little bit better.
That whole scheme of the way like Netflix does their thing all at once, I'm starting to get spoiled that way. Where now I can't wait for a whole week to watch the Mayans. I'd rather just watch it all at once.
Right.
I'm starting to like that.
I'm the last person that could speak on this panel because I have a to-do list next to my computer with, yes, things I need to do, but on the bottom of that to-do list, I have a video queue of things I write down to watch. So you think if you're going to write something down and commit it to memory and make that action, you're going to watch it, right? For about over a year now, I've been writing the same 3 or 4 movies and repeating myself because eventually that list, the list gets cycled through and added to and checked off, and you got to refresh and rewrite a new list. So I feel like an extra dodo bird having to rewrite the stuff that I should have already watched, and it's been a year, and I just every couple of weeks I'm keeping rewriting it on a new to-do list.
I've added it as well, man. But I'm interested. I'll get that one done. 20 minutes, you said, each one?
At most. That's one of the longest ones. Some of them are like 10 minutes.
I
12
remember
minutes.
when Dana was sitting there. Cage side, and he was talking a little bit of strategy, and they were talking about the bet, and because I watched it live, but I've also seen some videos of him, and I needed to rehash it just to remember all that. But he was actually like a guest commentator.
Yeah.
Totally different Dana back then.
Totally.
Now he's like Lex Luthor. Back then he was just.
He had some hair, kind of a little skinnier.
And you know what John said? It was clicking when John was saying the Fertittas and them admitting that in the interviews that they were the small guy, because the dynamic in that interview was you get kind of the Dana we're accustomed to, pumping the chest out, but Dana also keeps it real. So when Chuck's losing the fight, like, he's keeping it real, and the other commentators are politely piling on and going, "Oh, so your guy, how's your guy doing there?" And you really saw that dynamic shift. So it kind of
spoiler alert.
What you were saying. So, yeah, there we go. Yeah, spoiler alert.
That was 2005. That fight
sounds about right.
2003. Yeah.
You
couldn't say Chuck wasn't at his peak, or I just don't remember where he was in terms of the Randy fight.
No, it's in 2000. It's earlier than that. 2003.
Okay,
let me check.
On that same card was
between
the one where they also sent
3 to 4
Rico,
or something like
right,
that
to fight Nogueira. There were 2, weren't there?
I don't know if Rico was still with them technically.
Yeah, 2003.
He was still looked at as a UFC guy.
I think he was still like a representative of the UFC against Nogueira.
Maybe.
I just remember even watching Alistair and Chuck, and even though in a loss, going, man, that Alistair guy's tough, because I wasn't familiar with him before.
Hell of a shot.
It's like, wow.
If you go through that, that's the one guy that people don't talk about enough with head trauma. He has been knocked out
some bad
so many times,
yeah.
and they're bad ones, and it's throughout his career.
Yep.
Yeah, that one's one. Oh, yeah, I don't want to talk about it right now because that's a long conversation. What do you guys think of Conor McGregor kind of doing his version of a recap of his own fight?
It was awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know that all of it made sense.
Right.
If you're going to split things into what's sport and what's a fight, I mean, you can do that for a lot of people.
I know. And, because there's parts of it goes where I'm like, salute, brother. The raw honesty reminds me of the MGM when he took it head on. He put his suit back on and went out there and gave some praise. But, yeah, exactly. Like, there's a couple tidbits in there where you're like, oh, you're bordering on an excuse or offering an excuse.
Close.
And either just do what you've done, because you're still the sport's biggest star, that you almost don't need that, because you're just by saying he was the better man and I'll be back, I'm good. When you start getting into putting on your lenses of how round 1 wasn't as bad, there was people online that were going, was that a 10-8? The damage wasn't there, but remember, duration and dominance was. So there was some people bordering on a 10-8. I don't want to look at it as right. You thought maybe one could have scored it for you if it was more of a sport, like he said.
I appreciate that he reached out. I appreciate that he did break it down. But when people get into that argument of what's sport and what's a fight, you have to remember, too, there was a bell that sounded where they told a guy to get off of you and stop beating you up. So, I mean, you can't really do that argument of it's also a fight. Well, you also have a referee there that's saving you.
I remember Rashad Evans used to say, I knew that if a referee wasn't there, I'd be dead.
Against Machida, right?
Yeah. And it was like
Uriah played that card on Dominic Cruz. Uriah said the same thing. I think it was Herb not pulled me off, you'd be dead, because Cruz would tell him, whatever he'd tell him. But Uriah said, hey, I let you live. Remember he told him that?
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, that's not a bad line. I guess there's a point to that.
Here's the thing I took out of it, and I think you guys make some great points about Conor. I mean, I think this is the part of Conor that we all like, right? I mean, some of this bravado and brashness over the years has started to kind of wear thin on me. Like, it's just a little too much. But this is the side of Conor that we all love, is the fact that he really can reflect and be honest. you're right. He did go a little close. You know, hey, it's the same thing. And the Mayweather fight, that drove me crazy when he was like, I got to his back 3 times, whatever. You're like, what the hell does that have to do with boxing? Like, what are you talking about? But the one small line that stuck out to me in this, listen to nobody but yourself on your skill set. I'm curious to exactly where he's directed that, because I like one thing. I really like what he said, and I think Kavanaugh said the same thing with Rogan, is about how they were too defense-minded, and I think that's understandable against Khabib. I mean, you think about his offensive wrestling and how dominant it is. You're thinking about how to defend that, but if all you're thinking about is how to defend it, then you're actually making his job easier because you're backing up and giving those opportunities and waiting to defend. So I like that, but the listen to nobody but yourself on the skill set, I'm curious what that is. Is that addressing us? Is that addressing critics? Is that addressing people internally? You know, we had heard on Fight Night the same thing that Jon Anik has come forward with publicly, that, you know, his coaches didn't wrap his hands that night, and that's normally the case. Was there some kind of turmoil? Was there some kind of – is he talking about people within his own camp that he listened to that he shouldn't have? That one stood out to me as something I'm a little bit curious. Is there a deeper meaning to that?
I haven't read it. I haven't read the whole thing yet, admittedly. I think it's just a smart move for him to get out and do, whether you're being political about it or, you know, what I like to see, what George likes to see, that genuine side. But as far as that line, what you're saying, my initial, digestion of it is, oh, that sounds like self-psychology, where you're projecting outward, but you're really talking to yourself. But to your point, yeah, we're hearing more and more talk about that. And again, I don't think it would have changed the outcome, but these are things we have to address if they were in fact true. Mm-hmm. And in listening to a recent interview with Artem Lobov, I don't know if I got this correct, but he was actually sitting outside in the stands. So to hear that there is this over crazy amount of entourage, yet Artem's outside in the stands, his team members aren't wrapping his hands. This is just weird puzzle pieces you can't help but address, right? I mean, not that any of this would change the outcome, but yeah, I'm hearing a lot of this.
It's all those intangibles that you want to hear, but that's what we love about the fight game. I mean, does that change the fact that Khabib is the dominant wrestler? Does that change the fact, you could be on point 100%, 1,000,000%, he could still beat you, but you do still wonder about those variables, especially if they're ever going to fight again. By the way, I should say, just before we got on air, and I did tweet it out just a minute ago, but we do have the NSAC hearing tomorrow morning about the incident, about Khabib and Conor. Just FYI to anybody that's listening, nothing is going to happen tomorrow morning, unfortunately. It's going to be just administrative. Basically, you've got to get it on public record that they are on suspension.
Because right now they're on a temporary 10-day suspension.
That's right. So what there is, they're on a temporary suspension. What they'll do is they'll make a motion, hey, let's put them on suspension until we can get resolution.
But it counts as time served.
That's right. So basically tomorrow all we'll see is kind of an administrative step. I know a lot of people were hoping that maybe we'd get some resolution tomorrow. That's not going to happen.
Perfect. You know what? Because I want to talk about Zubara. Did I say that right? And why he's not fighting and Moncton. So let's save that for after the break. You're listening to MMA Junkie Radio on Sirius XM, Rush 93. Fight Nation 93. We'll be right back.
They were kicked off the set of The Fast and the Furious for being too loud and too good-looking. Once again, here's Gorgeous George and Goes.
College sports fans, follow your school on channels devoted to each of the Power 5 conferences. Find ACC, Big 10, Pac-12, SEC, and Big 12 radio, occupying channels 371 through 375 on select SiriusXM radios and streaming on your phone and at home on SiriusXM connected devices and speakers. All right, John. So we were talking about the NSAC. They have a hearing tomorrow, and you said it's very informal and not to expect anything. So from there, I want to continue what we were chatting about. Recently, Dana White was asked, hey, what's going to happen with the Khabib, and how do you react to his threat about leaving, don't send me my $2 million, I got my brother's back, talking about Zubaira.
Zubaira.
I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but that guy. He was supposed to fight Artem Lobov in Moncton, UFC Fight Night 138 in Moncton, Canada. I think we all agreed, right now, let's not have those two fight.
I agree.
And so Michael Johnson stepping in, but him not fighting him, aside from there's just too much heat between the camps, I think he's also one of these guys on the suspension, or is it just McGregor and Khabib?
As far as
that Dubaira guy.
No. He's not on suspension right now.
Oh, he's not,
so that would be purely internal sanctions. Nothing has been brought up with his license or anything like that. That was purely an internal decision. And I think not so much the fight itself. I support the UFC's decision here wholeheartedly. These two camps, it's too hot right now to bring these two guys together. But not that it's too hot for them to meet in a cage. To be honest with you, I don't think that would be a problem. The problem is you got fight week. Yeah, you're around fight week. They're in a little tiny town. They're in Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada. All right, like. I haven't been there before, obviously, but everything we've been told is it's a really, really small place. Like, it's hard to get to. There's not much there, but there's a brand new arena there, which is why the UFC came. They came with some money.
Sounds like the Uberlandia of
exactly.
Canada.
It's a small place, so everybody's going to be congregating in the same areas. It's not like if they were in Chicago or Dallas where there's 1,000 places to go. Like, there's, you might not know. They're going to be in the same spot. It's a smaller event, so the amount of staff that the UFC has there in terms of security, you'd have to bring extra people just to keep all these people apart. So I don't think the cage, and I think that's what needs to be clear, is that because I fully support the UFC pulling this apart, but not because I don't think that Artem and Zubaira could have a fight and that everything would go okay. It's just that I think the whole week would be a problem.
Now, the two guys that jumped into the cage and one exchanged punches with Conor, the other one cold-cocked Conor, or whatever you want to call it. Those guys aren't on any form of a suspension then, right?
No, not at this
So when
point.
Dana says we're good, does that mean that Dubaira at least is still on the roster? Has that been clarified?
No, he hasn't confirmed that yet or not. But I do think, I do believe, I mean, and I've said this in other places and I'll say it here, I honestly believe that when Dana was talking that night, he didn't know that those guys were on the UFC roster. Because people were like, well, what about those guys that jumped in? He's like, oh, they'll never fight here. I think he thought maybe they were just like people on Khabib's team. Now, this, again, is just a guess. This is not anything I've spoken to Dana about, but just, I mean, you get it, man. How many hundreds of interviews and conversations and press conferences, it might be in the thousands now that we've dealt with Dana. You start to pick up on his little verbal and nonverbal cues. I think that was one moment where I don't think, to be honest with you, that he knew that those guys were on the roster. So you can't take anything that happened that night definitively. In fact, I mean, look, I think about how much differently we all felt that night versus now. Yeah. You know what I mean? That night, it did feel like the end of the world. It did feel like, oh, my God, this is awful. And listen, it wasn't great. I mean, the most people ever watching our sport, and that's what they see, like, it's not great. There's no question it sucks. But in the end, not that much happened, right? It was a skirmish. Thank God nobody got hurt. It could have been way worse, but it wasn't.
It wasn't any different than boxing, what they've had.
Absolutely.
They've had the same thing.
So, I think Zubaira, I mean, listen, does Zubaira deserve some type of fine, some type of suspension? Absolutely. He deserves to face punishment. Now, I mean, Khabib was the one that screwed up first. He's the one that scaled the fence. But, Zubaira, I think the problem is he has the added fact of he said, I'm going to slap him. And then afterwards, he got on social media and was like, I said I was going to slap him, and I did. So to me, that makes it worse because, if you look at like not that I'm some kind of legal expert, but don't you always feel like that's when it gets worse is when it's premeditated? Like, was this a moment where you just lost your mind?
Right.
Okay, well, here's a slap on the wrist. Was this a moment that you planned, plotted out and made sure you – and that's the problem with Zubaira. I think he deserves some punishment, but I do think we'll see Zubaira fight in the UFC again. I do.
Okay, yeah. Conor's Instagram. Anybody want to finish their thoughts there? I can read it all if you guys want. Have you guys read it all, or just the caption that we had?
Yeah, no, I read it all.
Okay. Again, he kind of breaks it down rounds, 1, 2, and 3. In fact, let me read round 1, and then if you guys have fun with this, cool. We have some time to fill because Frank Mir has been rerouted to Thursday's show. We'll be talking to Jon Anik here in about an hour. He says, thoughts on my last fight, round 1. I believe from a sports standpoint, round 1 was his top position against the fence, 0 position advancement or damage inflicted. But top position from a fight standpoint, the first round is mine. Like, once I started to read that after what I had read on Junkie, which showed his opponent a lot of class, I was like, oh, here we go. He said actual shots landed and willingness to engage, straight left early, knee to the head on the low shot, elbows in any and all tie-up scenarios. Opponent just holding the legs against fence for almost the entire round.
I get where he's coming from in some degrees. Like, the one that I always go back to, right? St. Pierre versus Hendricks. Okay, to me, the right person won that fight. Okay, that's a controversial fight. Now, if it was a street fight, then you go, oh, it's a different winner because look who got busted up, look who got tagged a couple times. But when you break it down to what are the prize fighting rules that we are using? How do we score this thing round by round? It's like you can have a guy that wins 4 out of 5 rounds and in the 5th round gets dropped twice. Is wobbling and saved by the bell, and it's a 10-7 round, but he had already run the 4 previous rounds by laying on top. In a street fight, you lost. But in a prize fight, you won. So, I hear where Conor's coming from, but I know what you're saying, George, that it's kind of on the verge of an excuse. But I think we all did say, because I think if you'd have taken out if he'd said from a fight standpoint to maybe from a moral standpoint, because I do think when we were watching that round, at least my takeaway from round 1 was, okay, Khabib won, but you know what? Conor did better than I thought.
That's exactly what I thought.
He did better than I thought he would do. So from that point, I can hear where he's coming from, but you can't say, had the ref not ended this at the end of 5 minutes, I would have killed you from my back.
Right, and he wasn't just holding the legs. The same way you want to point out an elbow or a knee, I'm sure Khabib, if we rewind the tape, had a strike or two in there, Okay, moving on, he says round 2, he is running away around the cage before being blessed with a right hand that changed the course of the round and the fight. It was a nice shot. After the shot, I bounced back up to engage instantly, but again, he dipped under to disengage. That is the sport, and it was a smart move that led to a dominant round, so no issue, well played. If I stay switched on and give his stand-up even a little more respect, that right hand never gets close, and we are talking completely different now. I gave his upright fighting no respect in preparation, no specific stand-up spars whatsoever, attacking grapplers / wrestlers only. That won't happen again. I also gave my attacking grappling no respect. To defense-minded, he meant to write.
Yep.
Lessons, listen to nobody but yourself on your skill set. You are the master of your own universe. I am the master of this. I must take my own advice.
Yeah, see, I don't know if those are excuses. I think what he's trying to do, and it's something that I appreciate, is he's just giving you an eyesight into what he went through and how he came about. Preparing for the fight, which I thought was interesting. Now, I don't know if I believe that not 1 second was spent doing any stand-up whatsoever, but I do probably believe that 90% of it was focused on that wrestling.
Just to keep it simple, though, if he gave Khabib stand-up more respect, Khabib, you can't take away the fact that Khabib may not have recognized it and exploited the striking, or sorry, the grappling, sooner. I mean, he got him with the punch.
Well, we were all shocked when it happened, right?
I just don't like the way he makes it sound like my mistakes. I mean, you got to give Khabib credit to what he was doing. You know what I mean? Yeah. But okay, again, I think I'm going to stop right there unless you guys want me to keep going. I think the overall message is still pretty classy. He does give respect. He's willing to take another fight. So even though he knows, hey, I can move big pieces on this chessboard, I think he's saying, look, I'm willing to become a bishop or a rook. I'm not necessarily the king of the queen. The queen's the most powerful, but we'll say king in the instance of that's what McGregor is right now. Oh, sorry, Khabib is at 155.
You called McGregor a queen.
I thought that was pretty big of him, and I don't know if that means just Nate Diaz more money or if he's really willing to look and say, give me the Lee Iaquinta winner or someone else.
I think, listen, I think it's the right play. I think it allows the UFC, number one, to make the fight that should be made. Ferguson deserves that opportunity, man. You'd be screwing him if not. And let's not forget, they do share a management team, so maybe they're trying to make sure he gets a little bit. But at the other point, too, listen, I said going into this fight, I respected the hell out of Conor McGregor for taking this fight because this, to me, always was the worst stylistic matchup possible. And for him to take this fight after 2 years away, you got to respect the hell out of him. But you know what? I think it is a very smart strategic decision for him to not take the rematch right now because listen, Conor can make adjustments. Conor is a phenomenal fighter. Conor is incredible for exactly what he's saying here in breaking down exactly what went wrong and exactly how we would fix it and how we would tweak it. And let's be honest. If they were to rematch right away, who would you expect to see more differences and changes out of? Khabib, who has basically fought the same way in every fight for his career, or Conor, who I do think can make adjustments? But it would be risky, man. You lose that fight again in similar fashion to Khabib Nurmagomedov, I think the Diaz fight is probably still there for you, but, man, your brand takes a big hit, and you're really limited in what you can do in terms of the 155-pound division.
Yeah. I think Ferguson for sure is the right fight to make. Dana White is pushing for that, and if he's already pushing for it and the fans and media think it's the right thing to do, I have a feeling it's what's going to happen. And I have a feeling that they're going to try and get it done before Ramadan. I think the timeline works perfect. Then Khabib can take the summer off and come back in the fall again. But waiting a whole year, that one would be a tough one because it's just too congested of a division for him to only be fighting once a year.
Even to what John's saying, like, if you're Conor McGregor, yeah, you want to get back in there and you want to get yours, but he's sitting on a pile of money. The whiskey thing's blowing up. Why not make those two fight each other and put more mileage on each other before they get back to you? It's kind of like the way I looked at that Mendez-Frankie Edgar fight. I looked at it as he was just going, all right, let them beat the shit out of each other. I'll sit back and wait, and whatever happens, happens.
You know, you just said something, though, that has got me thinking. A lot of times we'll hear somebody in our sport, and look, if we were to do top 25 most powerful, I think Dana's at the top. Dana White said, oh, yeah, he may become a billionaire from this whiskey. It's killing it. It's doing great. I think I'm one of those guys that actually fell for, and I don't know if it's still true or not, but you saw what happened with one championship. They're worth $1 billion, all kinds of money. And then Bloody Elbow does this report where they've actually looked into it, and maybe it's not as much. Now, I'd like to see what the counter will be from them, but that's one thing I'm going to slow down on and see if August McGregor is really, everyone's going to be rocking that, and if this whiskey is going to be, lined up on every bar across America or whatever. The guy makes a lot of money, but if he's like Floyd, he pisses a lot of money, So
Yeah.
I think he can get that hunger back just from competition, but I don't think he's there yet where he's got that fuck you money, because he's not like us guys. We can go have a $15 dinner and we're fine. I mean, his dinners are probably $1,500.
I do think the whiskey brand has a lot more opportunity to make him money than the August McGregor line, for instance. I think that has a big opportunity. You know what? I did want to throw something out real quick, too. Sunday, May 5th is the start of Ramadan. So Saturday, May 4th, could you do a
Well, we went through that. The 4th, we said we took out the 4th, and we took out, I think it was actually April 6th.
See, the only reason I asked
and we said there's 3 Saturdays they could do it.
But the only reason I ask is because typically that Saturday would be a boxing weekend, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with Canelo now on DAZN, that's not a pay-per-view weekend anymore for boxing, right?
I think Floyd wants to come back against Pacquiao that day.
On Cinco de Mayo?
He's traditionally Cinco de Mayo on September 16th.
Yeah.
Now, that said, John, I was thinking, I know Khabib's really serious about this. He actually makes the pilgrimage back to Mecca. And I don't know if on the 4th he's doing this, and then on the 5th, he's just hopping on an overnight. So what I did was I removed May 4th, and I removed, I think, April 6th, landed on a Saturday, but it just seemed like too fuck you to the actual 6 months.
He's going to get 6 months.
So I thought it was the 13th, the 20th, and the 27th. There's 3 Saturdays, and one of those could be perfect for Khabib and Tony.
Or you just wait till July and you bring it back for International Fight Week.
The problem is it starts the 5th.
Oh, and then it's June 4th.
A month.
So you'd only give him a
he
month to
wouldn't have
train.
his proper camp, yeah. But now we really are back to the fall.
I think it's going to be the fall.
It's got to be.
I think it's going to be the fall.
Really? Wow. So no, Ferguson's not going to take another fight, right?
I wouldn't if I were him.
Yeah. So
I wouldn't either.
Yeah.
Unless you fight Conor.
Yeah. See, I think they got to do it in April. They got that 3-week window.
Whatever you make there is going to make up for You know.
Oh yeah.
I think they're doing Pacquiao Broner now. Is what I think they're leaning towards.
That's in a few weeks in December, though, isn't it?
Is it?
Schedule's gonna be so tight, but man, dude, if Khabib does end up getting 6 months, and then you end up saying, yeah, but we're doing the fight 2 weeks later, like,
I'm okay with it.
Are you though? Really?
Yeah, because he's serving a suspension. He's not fighting within 6 months, and why not be able to promote the fact that someone's coming off? I mean, because look, these fighters are supposed to train, right? I mean, they're supposed to train and get better, and then just let us know what the date is, and you show up. Is it going to be a little taggy? Oh my God, that they're promoting it, months out. I mean, I guess, but if you're one of those that, come on, man, you really stop at every red light and stop sign, everything. We're all kind of fracturing the laws and the rules here every now and then, and that's why I'm okay with them doing it, honestly.
You know when celebrities have to do, like, community service? Have they learned their lesson the second you told them they have to do community service, or have they learned their lesson once they've been through it and experienced it? They learn their lesson once it's
But Khabib's not like
right?
a Lindsay Lohan. He fucked up, but I don't see him doing that again. Whereas Lindsay's like, let us know when the next one happens. She's
been good lately. Give her props. Been all right.
All right. We got to take a break. You're listening to MMA Junkie Radio on Fight Nation Channel 83. We'll be right back after this break.
Charm, compassion, common sense. These guys have none of that. You listen to them, so you're no better. I am awesome, though. They are Gorgeous George and Goes.
That read could not have been any truer if you would have heard what we were talking about during the break.
College sports fans, follow your school. I already read that one. We have your chance to see a very live, special live performance by Ricky Gervais and friends. One grand prize winner will receive a trip for two to New York, along with 2 tickets to the show on November 8th. For official rules and to enter, go to SiriusXM.com/Ricky Gervais. Do that before October 31st. No additional purchase is necessary. Gervais is spelled Gervais. All right, let's go to the phones here. We'll start off with Dave in New Brunswick. What's up, David?
Hey, boys. David from New Brunswick. Just wanted to phone in and tell you that I'm going to my first UFC event, and I've been with it since the start. I checked out the scrambled broadcast of the very first UFC just to see if it was a work or not, and I listened to the announcers, and I almost shot myself when I found out that it was actually real.
There you go.
Always a good day when John Anik into the studio. John, how are you doing?
We're doing good, man. What fight are you looking forward to the most?
Well, the main event, of course. It's there's going to be a barn burner, I think. But of course, the new co-main event's good too.
That's solid. Yeah. Let me see here. Herman and Vellante have been around the block for a while. It'll be interesting to see these guys.
For sure.
Let's see here. We got Strickland against Nordine Taleb. I think that should be pretty fun. Yeah. And then, I mean, there's others, obviously, but yeah, I guess those are the ones that are jumping out at me.
And just want to say, John was right. Moncton is a small town. It's Moncton, not Moncton.
That's right. That's right. I was corrected and forgot to change that. You are correct, so I apologize.
I think I butchered it worse, so you're all right.
Yeah. GG got it pretty bad, but just wanted to say, it is a small town, 2.5 hours from Halifax, 10 hours from Montreal, and just 20 minutes from the beautiful Cormier Village.
Cormier
Village, huh?
Okay.
Yeah, Cormier is a popular last name here. It's Acadian. It's also the biggest last name in pro wrestling New Brunswick history. It had the Cormier brothers. The Beast, he was popular for his chain matches. And, of course, his brother, Rudy K and Bobby K, the wrestling team. And they do the figure 4 leg lock and the sleeper hold and everything. It was always funny when Leo Burke put someone to sleep in the sleeper hold. The referee would have to coerce him into waking him up, and he'd kick his legs around and then bend the person over and slap him in the back of his neck before he'd wake up. It was a pretty funny show.
DC should have been a guest fighter up there, man. He should have capitalized on it. I did hear there is a fantastic drinking culture in Moncton as well.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. My favorite bar we saw on the same road is the Avenir Center, is Fat Tuesdays, if it's still there. And of course, that's the English translation of Mardi Gras.
Right.
Why don't you call us after the event? Let us know how it went. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Is John going there? Because it's not a real UFC event if I can't spot his shirt in the audience.
Oh, man, I hate to disappoint, but it was a little difficult for me to get up there, man. We looked at the flight options. They're not easy. So the young Mike Bond from Canada will be handling that one solo up there.
Disappointing, but wish we had you.
I wish I could be there, man. I apologize. I know you guys have fun anyway.
Thanks, brother, for the call. Let's go to Dan in Oregon.
Dave fascinates me.
Yeah, I like him. Dan in Oregon, what's up, buddy?
What up, fellas? Man, this morning I got one comment and 2 questions for you. My comment is the Zone is killing it. They are everything that we wish Fight Pass was.
Yep.
They are doing the streaming game just like it should be done, man. And, for instance, what I think, if you're going to go streaming, the thing is you got to have your current fans, your network fans, and your over-the-top platform as well. And WWE Network did this better than anybody. It's like fucking on both of them simultaneously. It doesn't matter what package you got, whether you're a cord cutter or TV, you can watch that shit. And now on the Zone, they're doing that with Bellator, and they're signing the people to get you in with Canelo. And then, man, I'm saving money paying the Zone $10 a month with all this crazy MMA I'm watching, with Fight Nights Global's now on there, KSW's on there, and basically they're getting like the leftovers. Like Skyboxing pays maximum $1 to get Anthony Joshua versus Popkin on their network, and then leftovers go to the Zone. And it's genius, man. They're getting leftovers of KSW, Fight Nights Global. Who knows who else coming up? Maybe Risen, Bellator. That's worth all the money in the world. And UFC, you got to go 3 channels just to find it. Why can't we just watch it on Fight Pass? Why can't, hopefully ESPN Plus is going to be for those select cards. So I think the Zone nailed it. They got it right. And my 2 questions for you guys. Ben Askren's on Twitter. He says 98% chance he's coming to the UFC. Who do you want to see him fight as his first fight in? We know he's best friends with Woodley, so don't even think about Woodley. And the last question, One Championship says there's another big name coming, and it's a former champion is what the rumor is. Who could this possibly be? I want to hear you guys' guesses. Are we talking Mark Hunt, because that seems a little bit in the distance, or a name I heard thrown around? Frankie Edgar. Could he be one of the greatest lightweights, featherweights? He could fight any division. What about him over at 1? What are you guys thinking? Back to you, I'm out.
Thank you.
I think it's Demetrius Johnson.
Yeah, and I don't remember Mark Hunt being a former champion, so that disqualifies him, right?
Right.
Okay,
he's
got
got a tie, to the organization.
Yeah, he's got the tie with Matt Hume. There's a lot of things. He's got the tie. Look, here's the case if you lay it out, okay? And I mentioned on the road show, I've heard some rumblings behind the scenes that they are once again at least considering the possibility of scrapping the flyweight division. We know this has been on the table before. I've heard that it's on the table as a possibility again. You've got a couple things there. You've got the ties to 1 championship with Demetrius Johnson. You've got the fact that Dana come out and said that TJ Dillashaw shouldn't go down, Henry Cejudo should move up, which makes no damn sense whatsoever unless you're trying to get rid of that 125-pound division. There's a couple other things out there, but I really do think it's going to be Demetrius Johnson.
So will it be a trade? Like, we'll send you Askren, you send us
talked about
Demetrius?
this one time, remember?
You can't do it straight up because that's not how the contracts work, but you can be like, hey, I know technically we have rights over Askren, but we'll let him go if you let your guy go.
We'll keep talking about it when we come back. Quick break. It's the top of the hour. It's MMA Junkie Radio on Fight Nation Channel 93. Who is this, Danny?
It's Bach Overdrive or something. Hold on, I'll look it up.
Oh, Starland vocal, man.
I like this song. I've seen it in movies, I think.
Bachman Turner Overdrive. I knew it was something Overdrive.
Okay. All right. It's the second hour of the MMA Junkie Radio Show. Dan from Oregon left us with an interesting topic. As far as Ben Askren, I also saw him tweet. I think he was answering somebody. Your chances of coming over to the UFC, said 98%. Then Brendan Shaw retweeted it. So we know that him and Dana White had an interaction where Dana basically said, "Now I'm interested, but are you free of contract? From 1 championship, because otherwise we can't be talking." So going back to what John said, if Grown Up sat down and talked it out, and maybe the Askren run is just over in 1. Towards the end, he didn't fight much, and if he's just done and he's ready to come over, okay, I'm down. So I want to answer his question by who do we think he would more than likely fight in just a second. as far as Demetrius, John, that's just your guess to answer Jan's question, or is that like insider stuff that?
No, just a guess. I mean, again, I have heard that there is discussion that possibility is back on the table. I mean, we know for a fact that it was on the table before. It got shelved for a while. I don't know that anything has been decided, but I've heard it's a possibility. And, knowing that, I could see Demetrius. The other thing, too, think back to August. We did that scrum in Los Angeles, and I remember, we asked Demetrius what interested him, and he's like, man, like going around the world and like picking up belts in other organizations, that would be interesting to me. Getting the Sengoku belt, which doesn't even exist. Getting the one championship belt. I mean, he said it, like that would be interesting to him, is going around trying to beat other people from around the world. And again, you talk about the Matt Hume ties. It's a lot of things pointing in that direction, but nothing that anybody has told me, John, this is going to happen. Nobody has told me that. So this is just a guess, and I don't even know that it's going to happen, but it's a guess.
If they scrapped 125 here and he stayed, then him fighting at 135, the fight that would appeal to him the most is if Cruz were champ.
Right.
Because he could avenge the loss. All fighters want to do that. And set up a trilogy. Because now they'd be 1-1. Because he beat him in WEC. I know, for one, he's not the champ. And I know there's so many contenders that are, lying in wait. We'd have to figure out Cejudo first. You got Moraes, the Sunsao, but that's I'm thinking that man, that has legs. He could very well be headed that way. And with Askren's conversation, if he's headed this way, who would be next? Go ahead and say your thing, and then tell us who you think would be not next, but just the first fight for Ben Askren. Let's go around the horn.
We're giving our hand a little bit because I think this is going to be a future daily debate. But if they did scrap 125, don't you guys feel like they kind of got to settle that Cejudo Johnson first, and then whatever comes out of that?
Well, I mean, it'd be nice unless DJ's leaving, in which case it doesn't matter anymore. You know what I mean?
You don't think he wants it though?
I don't think he cares too much.
No,
I really don't. I think he feels like he's established what he's established. I don't think he feels like he lost that fight decisively, and I think he feels like he can go take care of his family somewhere else. That's all that matters to him. I really have never felt like Demetrius cares much about personal accolades at all, much about where he's ranked in history. I think he feels like, where can I make the most money? And not in a selfish, greedy way or in a flashy way. I mean, we know he's a pretty simple, humble guy, but I think, he just wants to take care of his family, man. If he can do that somewhere else, then he'll do it.
When would we hear if they scrap the division? Would it be just 2019, like we turn the page now with ESPN?
Who knows, man? The UFC
here's yet another announcement.
The UFC can do anything on any schedule they want. They're not contractually tied. They don't have that many fights. There are a few fights scheduled in the flyweight.
Benavidez is one, right?
Yeah, there's not too many fights scheduled in that division right now. And it was funny. I mean, I kind of joked the other day. Remember when Sergio Pettis moved up, and I was like, well, if there's no flyweight division left, maybe there's a reason. So. And the one thing is, I would hate to see 125 go, because I think there's a lot of talented athletes there, but most of those athletes could probably fight at 135. I mean, most of them, not many of them are so small that they would be like just completely overshadowed at 135. But it does make you wonder, we can't add in 165 because we don't have enough spots. Well, what if you don't have 125? Then could you do it? Now, I don't think that's the way they're looking, because I'm telling you, I've never heard Dana in the years and years and years and years that I've asked him even give it one thought, but it would allow a possibility.
Do you think even the biggest little guy hater warmed up to 125 these last few years with the greatness of Johnson's run?
No.
And with them, having some great fights, great fighters. I think Formiga's a fun fighter to watch. Borg's a fun fighter to watch. Benavidez has always been a fun fighter to watch. And then Cejudo obviously turned a corner. Pettis,
no.
I
think the flyweight division it's a hardcore division. It's a hardcore division. Huh? I don't think so.
In boxing, the really, really little guys, they've had some pretty big wars, and I think the flyweight divisions just kind of lack that because of the dominance of Demetrius.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean,
I'll miss it.
I'll miss it too. Yeah, I'll miss it too. But
I'll get over it fast.
The 35 division just gets immediately interesting. There's a couple guys that moved up because they missed weight, and they actually didn't have bad runs. I'm thinking of Dodson and Lineker. So, okay. Well, it's not official, so don't go to the bank with it just yet. But now let's answer the question as far as GSP and sorry, no, well, I just tipped my hand. Ben Askren, and who he would fight if he does get signed by the UFC.
That was gonna be.
Let me go first. It's got to be GSP, right?
Yeah.
How about you, John?
Where'd you come up with that one?
Yeah,
No,
it's like
I
off
mean,
the
my
top of my
question was going to be, because you're right, that's the fight that makes sense. My question was going to be, is that enough to get GSP excited? I mean, he's talking about legacy fights. He's talking about, only certain things appeal for him. I think there was a time that maybe there was more buzz about Ben Askren. I don't know if that's necessarily the case right now. Not that it takes away from who he is as a fighter, but is that enough to get GSP up off the couch?
Well, former Bellator champ, former one champ, two-time All-American, national champ, and undefeated. So there's something to throw at him and go, does that excite you? Because right now, GSP, with what he did at 85, by winning the title, not defending it, I know Dana's like, GSP, pumping his fist up in the air. So is he ready to just open, the gates of the castle for him again? Or is he going to say, hey, listen, now you got to take one for the team, and this is just a fight that I think it's not an oversized welterweight. He's got credentials. Run that guy, and then we'll talk about either opening a 65, a 75, you and Woodley, you and Conor, you and someone, I don't know. What do you think, Dan Tom?
Yeah, I was going to say that. It's funny. All this 165 talk is so popular now, obviously, and whatnot. And I will say, in the George St. Pierre's potential opponents article I did earlier this year on Junkie, Ben Askren was one of those guys, and I went and laid odds and why I think it could happen. And essentially, my argument was for the Canadian market, but also, you mentioned 165, and I would hate for them to do it for this fight, but it would kind of be so. It would be so UFC to do it almost in a way, because you see Dana pushing back when guys bring it to the table, no matter how much it makes sense, whether it's the Poirier, Nate Diaz, or sensible fights that would make sense. And I know we pitched. I'm pitching for a whole year. This whole let Woodley and GSP close out the division, then open 165 pounds that way, but. The fact is they want to do things on their own terms, and this would kind of make sense for them if we're looking at it from business terms, because, like you said, we're going to need something to bring George St. Pierre, and he's already looking like an undersized welterweight himself now, not just Askren. 165 kind of fits that. He's already been trimming down in weight. He gets that third title, so I would hate to see it done that way, but that's also the only way I could see it done.
Why haven't we heard about Colby Covington lately? By the way, I always thought of him as one of the two participants for 65. We just haven't heard him chirp.
It's the nose thing.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to recover.
But he said he'd be ready to go by November, so I think...
You got a nose thing?
I want to sneeze. Yeah, I've been wanting to sneeze. Let's take Kevin in Chicago. What's up, Kevin? How you doing?
What's up, guys? I just got a couple points to make.
Okay.
I was going to ask about Ben Askren, but Dan already asked that question. Yeah, I'd like to see Ben versus Darren Till. Not for the competitive standpoint, but just for the expose standpoint. I'd like to see Ben completely manhandle him. It would kind of set the record straight to show the delusional fans what the difference is in talent. But I think Usman versus Ben Askren is a really good fight to make. I know Ben was calling out Colby Covington, saying he would just run right through him. I don't think that's the case. I think Colby's a little bit more athletic. I think he's more in his prime. And my other point is, do you know if they drug tested PFL or what the situation with that is? Because I was a little bit skeptical of some of those guys. I was wondering if you get your thoughts on that.
They're tested by the commission.
That's right.
Yeah. They don't have an independent party like the UFC does.
To start at the beginning of what you were saying,
Thank you for the
of course, competitive-wise, they're fun matchups. But the UFC is not going to risk that O at the end of Ben Askren for Usman or for Till. They want that O to be matched up against somebody like a GSP, a bigger name, because that's how they can sell it. So they just wouldn't take that risk. It'd be fun to watch.
Can Askren walk into a title fight, by the way?
Dude, you never know.
Because Melendez did. He came straight into Henderson. Alvarez didn't. He had Cowboy first.
But he's not going to fight Woodley ever.
He's not going to fight Woodley, so that leaves him at the possibility of anointing a 65 division or just fighting a Covington, I guess, if Woodley's either not ready to go.
185 seems like a waste, even though he technically is competing
would not do good
close to there.
Yeah.
I just don't see Dana breaking the bank for Colby Covington and Askren. I think it's going to be whatever it is. If he's willing to bend on bringing in Ben Askren, it's going to be something big.
Would Askren and Nick Diaz do anything?
Yeah, because they would talk a lot of shit.
I mean, stylistically, I don't know that I necessarily love the fight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, although Nick is, still dangerous off his back.
But he wants to stand.
Yeah, but he wants to stand.
He wants the Condents, the Cowboys of the world,
That's
the
right.
Masvidal.
He wants to face them hitters.
Hey, but how about Kevin from Chicago Contender Series over here? He wants all-American wrestlers versus English strikers on every matchup.
The expose. So thanks for the call,
Thanks,
Kevin. Let's go to Marco and Waco. What's up, Marco?
From Waco, ¿qué pasa, dudes?
¿Qué pasa, man?
Marco.
Old gang in that day. I like that.
Thank you.
So, 2 points, man. One, 125, and the rumors that they tried to get rid of it. I mean, didn't the UFC learn their lesson when they got rid of 155 and then they brought it back because at the end of the day there is a lot of talent in there too? I remember the plan was to make 125 for the Latin American market and for the Asian market, but they never really pushed through with it. They never followed through, and I think that it's their fault and their shame on that. Demetrius Johnson dominated, but they're giving up a little bit too easy. They give out the 125-pound division because big market in Latin America and huge market in Asia.
Great.
I'm just saying.
I agree with that. I mean, I agree that. I mean, listen, the Asian market is probably only going to support about 2 events a year at this point. The Latin American market is getting bigger for sure. I mean, obviously they've got Argentina on the horizon. They're trying to do a few more events. I think Mexico comes back on the table next year, but I don't know if they're planning on going to Mexico next year. But they've got a new TV deal next year, which was one of the reasons it was kind of off for a little bit. But the last time they were in Monterrey, they had a hard time selling tickets. So it's interesting. But, keeping that weight class around for a couple of so-so markets is tough. But I agree. I would hate to see it go. And, again, this is all speculation, but I would hate to see it go, man. I like the flyweight division. I think that the fights are fantastic, but, they're thinking about it from a completely different point of view. They're thinking about, marketability and profitability.
Yeah, this talk makes me think of kind of more along the lines of what Dan was saying as far as I'm hoping these, streaming services take on and the gap is bridged from the other side. I think it was so easy for us to put the onus on the UFC, and therefore they're going to be the brunt of a lot of criticism, and some of it just being unfair because they're the big guy in the room, right? But I think, we can look at the other organizations to bridge some of these gaps as other possibilities we should be throwing around in these conversations too. Because my worry is that not just what he said, we saw the behind the scenes, there was a lot of things from TV to putting money behind fighters for Mexican market that we kind of seen fall by the wayside, sadly. And the Asian market, which is extra sad when you just consider the history to the sport, the history to martial arts, and their population worldwide. I mean, these are undeniable numbers, but yet the market doesn't reflect that, kind of like what John said. So it's really sad, and I feel like today, especially with rules and sponsorships and people not looking liking the image of certain shows, I feel like going back to the Japanese MMA actually would help our scene right now, whether we're talking about judging fights by the actual winners, we're talking about the PFL tournaments and deciding things, or we're talking about not just UFC, but even other organizations involving more pageantry to kind of get people involved now that the pro wrestling and MMA barriers have kind of been lifted for most people, so to speak. So yeah, it's a bummer, and I feel like I'm worried. My worry is that we're going to spread further from that Asian market and lose track of it. I feel like we've really kind of went away. When you go back and look at our history of the sport, we were much more connected to it. We had to be, with pride and so on and so forth, and we're moving further and further away. And the 125 division is a huge connecting piece to these international markets. It's a good way to look at it.
I wonder if it's the pull from boxing and pro wrestling that pulls MMA more towards how sporting events just get done in North America. Because I also like the pageantry. I like the production. I like how a fighter could be more individualized and personified or whatever,
I mean, I watched the last Risen show.
I was thinking about Skinny Alistair. Who brought that up?
Oh, yeah. John.
What do we call it? The mallet, the hammer? That was, I mean, I loved it because even if you... Huh?
He lost it one time.
I was going to say something else, too. It was completely off, though. Did you guys finish your thoughts there?
Just one last thing. I mean, I saw the Risen show, and I know Dan also talks about these shows a lot, their last one, and they were actually running, they had an audio issue, so the beginning of the show was messed up, and then they had to make up for time, and they had to cut out all their post-fight interviews. That being said, with all those issues, the production was 10 times better than what I've been used to seeing. It was so refreshing. I was introduced to guys that I will remember because of what George said, just from props and certain things in their walkout. They didn't even get their interviews because of the things like George said. I remembered that. And, of course, that fight had Kyoji Horiguchi just to tie out on the 125 in Asian market. We've been so long. Like, Yushin Okami was the most successful Japanese UFC fighter, by the way, guys. No offense to Yushin Okami, but what does that tell you? We were in need of a star. We finally get one. It's a division where the division needs, a contender. It's the best contender next to Demetrius Johnson, widely thought up until Henry Cejudo recently, and they let him go, Kyoji Horiguchi. So, again, I mean, they've been making decisions this way that's kind of already, if you're reading between the lines.
Since King Mo hasn't fought there, I haven't watched Risen as much. Risen has also not stacked their cards as much, in my opinion. I guess I'm going to give them another shot and watch them, but I was starting – same way with one championship, I was just starting to lose interest.
Yeah.
There's only so much time in the day. UFC occupies it, Bellator, and then PFL swept me off my feet this summer.
Me too.
So, man, we'll have a chance to reshuffle because at least, we can point to how they called it a regular season and a playoff PFL, but the one thing they're going to give us is an off season.
Yeah.
So that'll be nice. Okay. Marco, you held on, so if there's anything you want to add, go ahead because we were all talking, but otherwise I want to move on to the next topic. You got anything else, brother?
Yeah, real quick on Ben Askren, dude. I don't know why everybody's got the panacea with the George St. Pierre fight. George St. Pierre needs national champions for freaking breakfast. Josh Koscheck, Johnny Hendrick. John Fish was the freaking prototypical Ben Askren style fighting. He beat him too. Wrestlers are not freaking George St. Pierre's kryptonite. I don't like Ben Askren's freaking chances. I think George St. Pierre beat him and beat him easily. Peace out.
Okay, see ya. I mean, the Hendricks fight was a split decision. He didn't have him for breakfast. But, yeah, he beat up Fitch pretty good and Koscheck. Koscheck, he actually didn't even out-wrestle. I thought he just outstruck.
Jabbed him to hell.
Yeah. As Dan was talking, I was thinking about something. The UFC has led the way for a lot of growth in this sport. And I was just thinking about that Chuck Liddell money, the Matt Hughes money, all of the money behind the scenes that these guys used to put out every month, all the people that got clipped when they moved over to first IMG, WB IMG, now called Endeavor, sorry. But think about the money, the donations to Cleveland Clinic. Think about all of the politicking they did to get into New York. I think Mark Radner said he took 12 trips to Albany, New York, and it wasn't just him. It'd be him and an attorney and somebody else. Man, those guys, I don't want to say they had it good. They made some good money, but, boy, did they also do a lot for the sport on that front.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean? To allow these other organizations to be able to go in and do things that they're now able to do, like PFL hosting their finals in the city of New York. Too bad those guys don't ever get that applause, I guess.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, anytime you say too bad, I was going to say, nah, not too bad. If you go on Google Earth and look at their houses.
Right.
No, you know his house.
But you could still have the house
on Google Earth. I thought it was the block.
Oh, yeah.
My friend showed me that, and I'm like, okay, where on this block is his house? He's like, no, that's his house.
But you could still have the respect for what they did.
Definitely.
You know, and give them theirs. I mean,
they invested a lot.
When they were down $54 million, you hear back. I'd love to hear that story. Yeah. Hopefully that's a story in the top 25 if that's what they're going to do.
I haven't seen all the topics yet. They invested a ton in the future of the sport.
All these other organizations we've talked about, Risen is there because Pride's no longer there, because they came back as Dream, and that's no longer there. Affliction, what happened to them? All the stuff that happened on CBS Sports, what happened to them? They tried. The billionaires that tried. Mark Cuban. What's the cat from Bodog? Calvin Ayers.
Wow.
You know what I mean? There's those Russian oligarchs / billionaires. They've stopped funding a few of them. I mean, it's incredible, but the UFC was able to push through, but there was some risk involved. That's why I don't hate on them for making the grip of money that they do. I also don't hate on them for some of the salaries being as low as they did, because collectively the fighters and their managers or representatives weren't smart enough to come forward and claim that until a young Irishman started pushing everybody along. Why did it take to him? he's no smarter than everyone else. He's just more, I guess, business savvy and was able to figure it out by looking at the history of other combat sports. But why weren't some of the other ones able to do that? You know what I mean?
There's been plenty of other guys, too. You think about it. What about Tito? I think there's lessons to be
Tito
learned from Tito's
around,
battles, Randy Couture's, and even BJ. He went from promotion to promotion, was in talks with to box De La Hoya, although didn't come through. Started his own promotion like a Nick Diaz or many other people's did, but he did it to bring in the best guy, Gomi, because UFC wouldn't facilitate. So, I mean, there were all these things that were laid out, and Conor, to his credit, was the one that's smart, and he made the best examples of each of them, I would argue. Made the best business dealings as far as coming out on top. But, yeah, all to your point, you know?
And I wonder why Penn, Tito, Randy, when there was only probably 85 of them maybe on roster, why didn't they do it then? I think they would have been way more on the same page. You know, now it's going to get tougher and tougher and tougher, you know. Can you imagine Artem Lobov lobbing a call to Zubara, hey, are the doggies in with us? You know, Dagestani's in with us? Because we're thinking of doing this. I mean, that shit ain't going to work.
In with us.
You know what I mean?
I don't think that's the proper term.
The Dagestanis, are they in? Are the Brazilians? I
mean, you might want to clear that one by DC, see if DC could get away with that one.
Should be that.
Yeah.
But I can hear DC getting away with that one.
Tito doesn't get the credit that he deserves because he did do a lot of pushing back in the day, and he really...
And he got hated for it, too. He got hated for it, too, but, yeah. All right, let's take a break and reset. You're listening to MMA Junkie Radio on Fight Nation, Channel 93. Stay close. We'll be right back. And I believe when we come back, it'll be about the right timing to get Jon Anik on the show.
They taught Andy Griffith how to whistle. Here are Gorgeous George and Goes.
Immediately after Game 1 of the World Series, Jim Bowden, Jim Duquette, and Casey Stern are live from Fenway Park. Then Mike Stanton and Jim Amolo take over for MLB Round Trip, featuring your calls and post-game reaction from Alex Cora, Dave Roberts, and more until 3 a.m. Eastern. Your post-game home for the World Series is MLB Network Radio, Sirius 209, XM89, and streaming on your phone or at home on SiriusXM connected devices and speakers. Speaking of Goes, Jon Anik is a Red Sox fan. You're a Dodgers fan. Is there any sort of any sort of a little bet maybe we can
do something?
Do you think Jon Anik would be up for a wager?
What is this you speak of? I pick a team and there's a risk. What could be a friendly
How does
bet
this work?
for Jon Anik and Goes?
Tattoo bet.
Jesus. I don't know. I don't know that I can offer any services that he would even want. Just signed a huge contract. I'm a peon to him.
That's true.
But when I win the Mega Millions tonight,
you'll even things out?
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you guys think of anything, we'll pitch it to them. Like I said, I don't think John will back down from one. I think Goes his game as well. Joining us now on the hotline is the UFC head play-by-play announcer who recently inked a 4-fight contract, Jon Anik. What's up, John? How you doing?
I am always good and always good to be with you guys. Thankfully, it's 4 years and not 4 fights because I don't think I would fare too well.
Did I say 4 fights? Sorry, 4 years. Well,
can you imagine? I mean, can you imagine the list of people who would be lining up to punch me in the fucking mouth?
Well, I my game's thrown off because the wheels are turning. I'm trying to think of a bet between you and Goes. Goes is a Dodgers fan. You're a Red Sox fan. Game 1's tonight. So, I don't know. We'll let the wheels keep turning. And in the meantime, let us congratulate you, man, for that contract. Well-deserved.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, I will say, as far as the Red Sox and the Dodgers are concerned, my excitement is through the roof. You know, I'm glad it's L.A. My prediction is Dodgers in 7, but as a lifelong Massachusetts guy, I'm certainly hoping it ends up going the other way. We'll figure out a bet, though, afterwards. Jimmy Smith, I think, did a bet with me, like, I got to have the L.A. Dodgers logo as my Twitter picture for like a week or 10 days if the Dodgers win it, and he'll go with the Boston B if the Red Sox get it done. But, yeah, as long as we're not doing jiu-jitsu matches, Goes, or tattoos, I think I'm pretty much down for anything.
Yeah,
but thank you, George. Yeah, right. But no, thanks, George. It's exciting, obviously, and I think anytime you go into a negotiation, there's some trepidation, and you have a lot of different thoughts going through your head. You know, do they value me? Do they still want me? Do I still want to, you know, devote my life to this? And then I think, you know, you allow some other thoughts to creep in with other sports and other things, but when it came down to it, I mean, I wanted to be with the UFC for 25, 30 years. I wanted this to be what I did with my life, and that's why I left ESPN in 2011, and onward and upward, man. Thankfully, they're giving me a longer leash and an opportunity to continue to prove myself beginning November 3rd in New York.
John, did you represent yourself, or do you have representation?
I have an agent. I do.
What's the worst thing he could have came back to you and said, like something along the lines of, they said take it or leave it?
Well, I think just that they wouldn't be interested, right? Because I think sometimes in business or in the corporate world, you don't really know where you stand until your contract is up, and that's kind of the cold, hard truth. I mean, oftentimes after a pay-per-view broadcast, no news is good news, right? If I don't have a text from Zach Candido or Craig Borsari with a message from one of them or from Dana, that's a good thing, right? So sometimes you don't know exactly where you stand until it's time to negotiate. But I think they knew that I need them, and maybe vice versa. And thankfully, we're able to make it happen for another 4.
What kind of a text message have you gotten before? Have you actually?
Well, I mean, there's things, and they don't do it during the show. I mean, obviously, they all have a talk. I have a talk back, and they can talk in my ear and do for most of the show, as you guys well know. But no, I mean, there are certainly times where, you know, hey, I didn't think it was a great show, or you could have done better with this.
Wow.
More often than not, the text has something constructive as opposed to being like, great job, dude. And that's okay. You know, I think a lot of different people are motivated by a lot of different things. And even though I think some people say the most basic human need is to feel appreciated, and I kind of do subscribe to that theory in some respect, for me, in terms of focus and motivation, sometimes tough love has been the best recipe for me. So I'm okay with, no news is good news.
Was it a tough negotiation, or was it a couple calls and a slam dunk?
I guess it went on a little bit longer than I thought it would, but no, it was pretty seamless once we sort of got the ball rolling, and thankfully there was mutual interest on both sides. And again, as I've said this on your show before, as you guys know, my contract is structured in a way that they really can get rid of me at any time. And it's sort of unique to the UFC. You don't see a lot of broadcasting contracts structured that way, but I'm okay with it because, look, if I'm not doing the job to their liking and it's not efficient enough for what they're looking for in that seat, then go get somebody else. I'm out to prove myself. I feel like I'm the lead voice of the UFC until proven otherwise. And again, it sounds trite, but November 3rd gives me the next chance to prove that I'm the guy.
Was it just financial stuff that you wanted, or was there other stuff? And can you share anything else that you wanted, to reaffirm how much they enjoy having you be their lead guy, not just behind the mic on fight night, but some of the other work you've done over the years has been well received, well done, and I don't know if you're up for more, because you certainly do travel a lot, but I don't know if you're even interested in revisiting that. So, because there's something you can share on that front.
Well, it was interesting back in 2014 when I negotiated my second UFC contract, because the international slate was so heavy that I think at that time there were some real conversations with my family, like, look, bro, you're away 110 nights a year, and a lot of those nights you're not even reachable because your cell phone doesn't work in whatever country you're in. And now I have 3 kids, right? So that's a whole different injection into the equation, if you will. But, I'm not going to get into too many details, but for me it was less about, travel and expenses and all of that tertiary stuff than it was for me about just having the core of my job be rooted in doing play-by-play for the UFC. And I haven't been on the desk, I haven't worked the desk, like hosted the desk since 2016, and basically all I'm doing right now is play-by-play, do the Hall of Fame induction ceremony and a few other voiceover things here and there, the video game, but by and large the job's rooted in play-by-play, and after calling live events in mixed martial arts, you kind of don't want to do anything else. I know there will always be that NFL pull for me. I think I'll always think, what would it be like to call a National Football League game? But this is where I want to be, and thankfully I'm being given another chance to be here, at least for the foreseeable future.
All right. So I've been a question hog. I'll turn it over to Goz. Goz, what do you have for Jon Anik?
John, I'm going to ask you a question. I don't want you to murder me for it. But I'm only bringing up this name just because he's done everything but the UFC. And I was thinking about maybe a little bit over a week ago, maybe a week and a half, Mauro Ranallo had tweeted something that said along the lines of, anybody looking for an MMA guy? There's an opening. When you saw that, were you kind of like, shut up? Was that still in the middle of the negotiation process, or were you done at that point?
We were well done at that point in time, and it was just, I think it was verbally agreed to for a while, and then finally, got all the final signatures. But anyone, I think, who listens to you guys regularly or listens to my podcast knows how much respect I have for Mauro Ranallo and how much of a thrill it was for me to meet him when I got to 8 or 9 years ago. And I think he's tremendous. I think he adds so much to the event, and I did see his post, and I hope he gets that opportunity if he so wants to be in the UFC. It's certainly, I guess, the only major promotion that he hasn't, laid his voice to. So, he's a guy that has been a huge inspiration for me for more reasons than one, and a guy that I've looked up to a great extent. And we all have our different style, but, all the respect from me to Mauro Ranallo for sure.
I want you to speak on one thing that I don't think you get enough credit for, and that's that normally when somebody gets thrusted into this role, they have their partner and they develop a cohesion together, right? When you did it, you were thrown various different partners in the beginning, and I want to know, how difficult was it to finally get into that rhythm, seeing as almost every other show you were linked up with someone else?
Right, and I feel like, generally speaking, you find out pretty early on as to whether or not you have chemistry with another broadcaster. I didn't think too much about it as it was happening, because when I first got the UFC job, they auditioned me with 5 different guys right out of the chute. While Joe and Mike would be calling a show, we would be back in the edit trailer calling those fights simultaneously. So I didn't know if it was going to be one consistent partner or if it was going to be a mix of guys. I think when you see the NFL teams and you see Ian Eagle and Dan Fouts, the regular CBS number 2 team week in and week out, you know, maybe part of me thinks, man, it would be nice to sort of be able to do 25 or 30 shows a year with 1 or 2 guys, but I just feel like our group of MMA analysts, and I know you guys will agree with this, they just don't get the national recognition that they deserve for how good they are. And when it comes time for the Sports Emmy Awards, you know, I mean, how has Joe Rogan not been nominated for a Sports Emmy at this point in time? And if he has, I apologize. But these guys just don't get the credit for how good they are. So, you know, I appreciate that you feel like maybe I deserve some credit for that, but I would say to a man, all 12 of these guys, they have their own styles and their own skills, but they've made my job pretty easy. And, you know, I look forward to, I think you're going to see new teams even moving forward here in 2018 and beyond. So we're ready to go, and I'm excited to see the new blood if they bring some in, and to see other guys who have emerged like Paul Felder maybe get an opportunity on a bigger show here coming forward.
UFC play-by-play commentator Jon Anik on the hotline. He just inked a 4-year contract with the UFC. John Morgan, what do you have for Jon Anik?
So, John, we were in a unique position here in that we were able to break this news, which was fantastic. But that put me in a position yesterday where my Twitter handle was attached to yours all day long. And I saw that you went to Twitter and said, hey, guys, I've read every single message. Thank you for sending them all. I appreciate it. But I'm wondering, because there was this huge outpouring of support, man. I saw so much love coming in your direction. But there was the occasional, I'll just say, jackass that I didn't understand, because I think you've been such a professional and done such a fantastic job that we're spitting hate your way, saying things like, this guy doesn't even love the sport. You can tell he doesn't care. You know, is this that? I mean, as you're going through these messages and feeling like pumped up because everybody's going, yeah, kudos, well deserved, love this guy, and then you see the occasional jackass. What's your emotion there? Do you go like, what do these people want from me, or do you just blow it off? How does it go?
Oh, I feel bad for these guys, right? They're like, no, 4 more years of Anik. What am I going to do? I still got to watch the UFC. It's a real dilemma for them, and I guess I apologize for that. But, you know, I feel like I've turned that ratio around pretty good in my favor dating to 2011. I mean, there have been a lot of holes and gaps that I've had to close when it comes to my mixed martial arts knowledge and acumen. And, you know, I'm never blind to the criticism. A lot of it is constructive, but, yeah, man, it kind of comes with the territory, and I think John and Goes and George, you guys know this as well as anybody. When you're in sort of a public forum and you put yourself out there in a public space, there's going to be criticism. But, dude, when I walk back to my hotel room, January 2012, after working my first show in Nashville, you know, I order a cheeseburger. I'm all excited to dig into it, and I opened up Twitter, and it was just an avalanche of hate and negativity. And I didn't know if I was going to be in for that for 3 years or if that was going to dissipate. And thankfully, I've had an opportunity over 7 years now, you know, almost 10 years calling MMA fights, to hone my craft and maybe get into a few more good graces. But it is what it is. I mean, it bothers my wife and my mom, candidly, a lot more than it bothers me.
All right, let's turn it over to the fight analyst. Dan, Tom, what do you have for Jon Anik?
Man, from the other side, I got to imagine that journey's been a positive uptrend, even through the trenches of Twitter, if you will. Because I remember on this show, I mean, I was a fan of yours, John, back on the, correct me if I'm wrong, MMA Live ESPN days, and I would call into this show as just a fan back then when I heard you were going to be on and asking you questions, and have these guys forward questions, you know, curious on what the climate and the culture was like at ESPN. So long-winded there, but just great to see your journey. But, you know, touching on what Go said about commentary teams, I dare not split hairs between guys that I like probably more than I should as a media member, like Paul Felder, Daniel Cormier, Dominic Cruz, all awesome guys. But I will say Stanek will probably be in my top 5 of commentary teams, and that includes names of like Bob Costas, Marv Albert, and names I grew up on. So let me just ask you, John, what are the commentary guys that you grew up on, you look up to, and you draw inspiration from?
Well, that is very kind of you, and I know Brian Stan, that would mean a lot to him, and I do still think that he wants to scratch that itch again. We'll see if that happens at some point down the line. But really, the name that I always come back to, at least growing up a diehard Red Sox fan in the Metro West Boston area, was Sean McDonough. He did Monday Night Football for a while. Obviously, he is off of that beat right now and back to doing major college football and other big projects for ESPN. But he was just the guy that I wouldn't say I tried to emulate, but I just thought he was so clean, and when he had to take a stand, even in that play-by-play seat, he was willing to do so. I just thought his whole approach was pretty thoughtful, and then I had the opportunity to work with him, and I said, like, first ever during a sports update on his show, and he asked me to stick around after the update, and he said, you know, there's no such thing as first ever. Like, it's first. You don't need the ever, so next time you do an update on my show, you know, just drop the ever. And just that type of attention to detail was something that stuck with me. But obviously growing up in Boston, such a huge sports town, there were a lot of influences. Mike Gorman with the Boston Celtics was a guy that I thought did a great job on the TV side as well. So a lot of influences for me, but, I thought I was going to be a print journalist. I just was going to be a sports writer, and then I started running into guys like Ben Folks, and I figured I better find something else to do because I couldn't write with that guy.
Well, I was suspecting to hear some Boston area names in there. That's great stuff, John. But now just kind of staying on that, as far as commentators you watched growing up. Obviously, you're a sports guy. You watched a lot of sports. So I guess I want your kind of unique opinion here on something that's kind of been beat to death, but I feel like you'd have a unique opinion on this. Is, growing up watching sports, and we just saw it in the NBA the other night with a brawl that broke out. If you're really objective, we've seen this stuff happen through all sports time continuums all throughout, and production and TV has evolved throughout times with different sports, but we've all seen it kind of covered in different ways. Obviously, I'm rounding this to the UFC 229 post-fight melee with Conor and Khabib, but I guess, did you ever think about that that as a possibility before that night, as far as stuff like that happening, or have you already experienced any situations like that in calling action?
Well, it's a good question. I think maybe we had an expectation that there might be a fight that broke out in the crowd, and perhaps that could spill down close to the octagon and have some impact on our evening. So I think you walked into that arena for UFC 229 feeling that tension and thinking that that could boil over at some point. But never did we think that it would involve the combatants and there would be sort of a Strikeforce 2010 revisited inside the octagon. But I guess for me, you're calling the biggest fight in UFC history. So the last thing on your mind is, I'm going to be calling a brawl in about 30 seconds. But that's exactly the way it went down. I was calling the fight, and then the next thing you know, until I was told otherwise, I was just calling the brawl until somebody said, dude, stop, calling the brawl. We don't need play-by-play on that, So, and then obviously we panned out, right? We went wide, and some people thought maybe that was a miss, that we didn't sort of capitalize on that moment. But, I thought our production truck handled it well. And, dude, imagine those guys, right? Because you guys are all in the business. Like, imagine that production truck. For me, it's like, people are like, to varying degrees, maybe you guys handled it well. I mean, we're just talking and reacting. The truck has to make a decision in the moment. What are we doing here? What are we going to show the fans? What aren't we going to show the fans? And, I just have a lot of respect for all of our producers, Lappy LaPlante, who was at the controls, Zach Candido, everybody who was entrusted with sort of making that decision in real time.
John, do you still have your peeps back in, Bristol, Connecticut, where ESPN is? Or am I thinking WWE? They're Bristol, Connecticut, right? Or
no, you are exactly right. WWE,
yeah.
I think, was in Stamford,
there you go. So,
yeah, down by Greenwich. But, yeah, man, I heard from a lot of people in Bristol this week, and it's really an exciting component to this new extension for me, just because, as you guys know, and as Dan alluded to, I was cutting my TV teeth at ESPN 2007, 2008 when we launched MMA Live on ESPN.com and later on ESPN2, and I just never thought 10 years later. I thought maybe the UFC would get into the MMA business a little bit, or ESPN would, I should say, but never did I think that ESPN would take hold of the entire domestic UFC television rights package 10 years later.
Right.
So, I mean, that is progress to such an extent. And now the challenge for us is to make ESPN want to be in the business more than 5 years. So the work is far from finished, but I'm pretty confident that once Bristol immerses itself completely in mixed martial arts the way all of us have and devoted our lives to it, understanding fully, like a lot of their employees now, just like Fox did, go completely from whatever department or whatever thing they were doing to covering the UFC full time. And when they get the bug like the rest of us, I think we can really have this thing snowball and be even bigger domestically than it is right now.
Earlier I misspoke and I called it a 4-fight contract. It's a 4-year contract. This is your chance to go, hey, what a coincidence. I misspoke. It's going to be Boston for Dodgers 3. Or are you really going to stick to the LA Dodgers prediction, John? Because you are going to get, I think you're going to get some hate if you stick with that, brother. I appreciate it and all, but I think you just got to go down with the ship.
Well, I think the Dodgers bullpen really was a problem in the Brewers series, and I think they do have a better bullpen than the Red Sox, and I think in a long series that could be the difference. I also feel like because the Dodgers were there last year, the hunger is just off the charts. I think Kershaw just doesn't feel like being denied, and I think he's going to give them a big effort tonight in Game 1. All that being said, I do think the Astros and the Yankees are better than the Dodgers, right? Just because I think the Dodgers are going to get it done here. I think the Red Sox have just beaten two teams that are better than the LA Dodgers goes, with all due respect. I think if the Red Sox play up to their capabilities, they're the better team on paper, 1 through 25, and should win the series. But I'm not going to cash any tickets until it's done. I'm hopeful, but I am cautiously pessimistic.
And don't forget Anik's strategy of basically betting against himself so that way he's not let down. So I think that he may be hedging a little bit here too. You know, he's like, I don't want to let my excitement get too much. I probably think we're going to lose. That way he doesn't set himself up for disappointment.
Yeah. I thought
exactly.
this was going to...
We're on a landline as we're talking. I placed a $300 wager on my phone on the Dodgers.
All right. Hey, congrats on the new deal. We're really, really stoked for you, man. I wish they would have locked you in a long time ago, because I really felt that they found their guy when you first started with the company, and especially when you took the helm after Goldie. So anyway, congrats. We keep looking forward to your work for the next 4 years and hopefully beyond that.
Thank you, man. Thanks for the support, man, the long-standing support. It means the world to me. The text yesterday really touched me, and thanks for having me on today. Hope to talk to you guys soon.
All right. See you, John. Take care.
See you, boys.
All right, and with that, we'll take our last break. It's MMA Junkie Radio on Fight Nation Channel 93. Stay close. We'll be right back.
Never heard of something.
All right, here we go.
Blah, blah. Here are those two dummies, George and Goes.
No, there's one dummy. It's Goes. I'm trying
Wait, I thought you were talking about him.
No, you're giving me the whole, like, hurry up, so I'm trying to get going.
because he was saying how cool the song was. I didn't want you to get into it. And
you threw me off my game. All right, we got to close up with the daily debate. We saved it till the end, and here we go, guys. Which PFL finalists rise to the top surprised you the most? And I think they're probably talking about not just regular season. I mean, not just the playoffs, but regular season as well. So here are the 4 names, or excuse me, 3 names to consider. 4 if there's someone outside the box. Please speak if you feel like there's someone else other than these 3. Ray Cooper III, who is one of the finalists in the welterweight division, took out Jake Shields. Lewis Taylor, who's one of the finalists in the middleweight division. Got a little bit of an assistance there through some controversy through John Howard. I'm not saying he wouldn't have won the fight, but that's the guy. And then the last one would be Sean O'Connell from Fight Nation Channel 93. The real OC fought in the UFC, went over to PFL. And, man, I'm telling you, he had to sweat a couple of his fights because I was in Long Beach when he had to come back from being down 10-9 in the first to Dan Spawn, and then he came back and iced Milino Rama, but it was a firefight. So those are 3 choices there with, of course, an option for other. Let's start with you, John Morgan.
I think the easy way to do would be go with Ray, because I think most people probably hadn't seen him fight a whole lot, to be honest with you. So he was kind of like the unknown commodity that came in. But if you talk to some people,
there is the word surprise, so yeah.
So I think that would be the easy answer to me. But I'll actually go with Sean O'Connell, man. I just thought that first of all, I was pulling for the guy. I mean, I think during his time in the UFC, I always enjoyed him. I love him as a radio host as well on Sirius. I think he's fantastic. But I thought, man, here's a guy that stepped away from the sport a little bit. He's got his hand in a bunch of different things. He's calling the fights in the early part of the night. And then you add in the fact that his style is not a dominating style. It's a go in and get roughed up kind of thing. How are you going to win 2 fights in a night, And he did it. So I'll go with Sean O'Connell.
Dan?
Man, Sean O'Connell is probably my favorite story of the 3, and there's plenty deserving that aren't on the list, of course. Sean O'Connell is definitely my favorite story. Ray Cooper did come out of nowhere, and it was surprising, so I could definitely see that as far as like a breakout star. But as far as surprising, if I want to stick to that word, I'm going to go kind of hipster here and give a shout to Lewis Taylor, who we've had on this show. A 39-year-old guy who he had some bad losses back in Strikeforce early in his career that didn't look like it was going to go much further than that. Steps into this tournament, comes out of nowhere, ices a few guys, gets a couple close calls, and is now finding himself in the finals. So I'll go Lewis Taylor.
All right, how about you, Goes?
The way they got there, for me, would have to be Ray Cooper. But the fact that they're there would have to be Sean O'Connell, just because of, if you look at his career and being able to put streaks together. John mentioned the style. I just wouldn't have imagined he did it that way. So I'm going to go with Sean O'Connell.
Okay. I'm going to go with other Steven Seiler.
Nice.
I actually talked about him yesterday. But here's the reason. Because I clearly remember when the rosters came out, I saw your breakdown, Dan, and how could you just not gravitate? As when you're looking at the featherweights, Alexander Almeida was a former champ. But even past those 2, Lance Palmer and Andre Harrison, and you just thought, okay, man, I'm a fan of Seiler, but is he really going to get past one of those 2 beasts to make it to the final? I don't think so. Cooper was an interesting story. The word surprise should have me saying Ray Cooper because that was a big surprise. But still, I think I just remember day 1 from the very beginning going, man, that's a rough road to get past those 2. So I'm going to go with other.
Nice.
Here's how it broke down, guys. Ray Cooper, 52%. So more than half came in for him. Sean O'Connell at 34%, and then Lewis Taylor at 6%, other at 8%. So there you have it. That's our daily debate brought to you by the MMA Junkie Radio team. Of course, John Morgan from the MMA Roadshow with John Morgan. All right, so tomorrow's me. Yeah, was telling me Mears booked for Thursday show. Yeah, so I don't have any names to announce just yet, but we may have one that I think will be highly entertaining. And I think the editorial will love me, and I know the fans will be into it. So stay tuned for that. Keep it locked on MMA Junkie throughout the day, obviously, because we're covering the sport like no other, man. Every 30 minutes, these guys are busting up a story, putting up a video. So subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's blowing up as well. That's where you catch this show on overtime and pre-show and things like that. It's youtube.com/MMA Junkie Video. All right, so for Dan and John and Goes, and Danny back east, I'm George. Have a nice day. Go Man U, and the rest of you go out there and be a champion.